So this is going to be quite a provocatively titled video, but there is a reason for it, and that is because there really isn't a way to win in this event. And if you want the too long don't watch of this video, and let's face it, all of my videos are too long, so just don't watch. Just watch Nandy's video on this. He's covered it great. He's got all of his stuff that he has access to, you know, playing the map before it's released and looking at the stats of the squigs and what's coming out on different waves, yada yada. So it's got much better information and presentation on that than I can manage. And he himself said that this mode will actually be impossible to win this time, and for once I do agree with him. And you may be thinking yourself, oh, I'm really clever and I've figured out a way to get around how the devs have made this event so that it's impossible to win, and hopefully with this video the purpose of it will be to disabuse you of any such notions, that it's convince you that you will in fact lose, and Nandy is correct in his assessment that the high score is probably just going to be determined by who can get the most reinforcements to drop on squigs in the last wave, which is, yeah, you know, whatever. It's not very interesting. It was fun in the previous event seeing how people managed to sort of break them, but I guess we're just going to have to go with this time. That being said, there are still ways that you can maximise your score, I think, and I'll go over that as well, what I think you can do to maybe just get as far as you can in the legendary waves, even if your characters maybe aren't up to scratch and they can't kill everything that comes out before the squigs do under normal circumstances. So that might be a bit useful. And you know what, I'll just get that out of the way now, because that's probably the most useful part of the video I can do. Anime shooter, yeah, okay. That's the software I use to record things with. Just on the record, I hate anime. Hope that's not too controversial. I imagine it is. Why is that like that? Okay. So my phone, it takes terrible screenshots, and I can't take a screenshot of a YouTube video without it having to pause it first. There's no shortcut. So anyway, shit screenshot, but that's not really important. The only really important thing is to say where I think I'm going to be setting up my characters to kind of endure and survive and kill as much stuff as possible before I accept my inevitable death at the hands of squigs. So, if you look at the map, you can see in the top left-hand corner, there is a hex with tall grass with cliffs around it, and only 2 hexes adjacent to it. And on that hex would be a good place to set up someone like Makatep, or, as I'm doing, Boss Golgorts, which is actually a bad idea, but I'll explain why I'm doing that later. So, if you have Makatep on that tall grass, and you have Aleph and Ravas next to him, you have the passive aura of Makatep healing Ravas and Aleph. You have Aleph's passive being able to heal either Makatep or Ravas, and then her targeted heal as well to also provide healing. And you have Aleph and Makatep healing themselves for 10% of their max HP every turn via their living metal trait. So you've got a lot of defense there, because Ravas and Aleph, they have high armor. You're up against orcs who have low pierce in general, apart from Boss Golgorts and Tank Smasher, so priority would be to kill them, but low pierce means that their high armor will be negating most of the incoming damage, provided you have them upgraded high enough, which I do for this situation, so that's nice. And then the tall grass for Makatep, that will be providing -2 hits to any attacks he takes from range. So Grot Tanks will only be doing 1/3 damage against him. Same goes for Snapper Wrecker and Boss Golgorts, or at least Boss Golgorts is passive, which deals 3 hits. Snapper Wrecker, he can deal 4 hits. However, that's only if he's at full health, and also because you've got Ravas next to Makatep this turn. In this situation, hopefully that'll be providing -3 hits taken from range by Makatep. So Makatep will only be taking 1 hit from any possible ranged attack that is incoming. So I think overall that would be a good defensive formation to have. So how do you now stop them from being killed by the squigs? Well, that's simple enough. In wave 11, some grots get spawned, and you set up in your defensive position. You let the grots just do their thing, just keep multiplying, and you don't interfere with that. And by the time wave 15 rolls around, hopefully you'll have enough grots around you to kind of provide be a shield against any squigs trying to get into melee with you. Now, of course, these squigs have their bounce ability, where if you attack them, they can move 2 hexes, which could potentially put them adjacent to one of your characters and allow them to wreak havoc, but you'd just simply ignore them and kill everything that isn't a squig on the map, and that should allow you to max out your points that you get for everything up until wave 15. Now, there was one thing I wanted to test out in the previous survival, but I never really got around to, and it was that, because I understood that when we had the chaos survival and the God, I'm forgetting the names. Pure strain gene stealers revived themselves. You got points for killing them after they'd been revived, and you just get points in general for damaging stuff. So I do have an idea in the back of my mind that if you just get points for dealing damage, if you left Gibbo Scraps and Boss Golgorts alive on the enemy team, you could potentially just keep chipping away at Boss Golgorts' health, and then he would be healed up by Gibbo Scraps, and that might just give you a constant stream of points up until such time as you just get tired of shooting at him, essentially. I don't know if that's how it would work, and also you'd need to be able to withstand Boss Golgorts' fire with your characters, so that's something to consider, but I don't know, that might be worth trying out at some point, just see if you can just grind out infinite points by allowing yourself to be shot by grots in melee, and just keep shooting at Golgorts, letting him get healed up, and yeah, farm infinite points. That's just something that sort of floated into my mind. I hadn't prepared on talking about that, so I've kind of lost my train of thoughts a little bit, but so definitely something to consider there. Maybe that's a way of breaking this event, but aside from that, I really don't think there's anything. So yeah, you've got your guys on the high ground in that defensive position there, just taking everything out. Of course, you'd have to be careful not to trigger battle fatigue in grots too much, but once Snotflogger is on the map, he negates battle fatigue in any grots that are friendly to him. So once he's out on the map, as long as you can keep him out of melee with your characters, because he does quite a horrific amount of damage. I think he spawns at Diamond 1, so he'd be a bit of a threat even to fairly tough characters. So definitely keep him out of the way, but yeah, once he's on the map and you're surrounded by grots, that should be your sort of permanent situation until you start killing the grots. And obviously the grots spawn on wave 11, so you'll want to make sure you kill all of those grots, because you won't be getting your free experience tomes until you've killed everything that spawned on wave 11. Thankfully, though, the grots, when they replicate, you don't have to kill the replicated grots to clear the wave. I'm pretty certain is how that works, because that's how it works with Scarab Swarms. You only had to kill the original Scarab Swarms to clear a wave. So no reason why that won't work the same way with grots. So once Snotflogger's on the map, you can just take your time, snipe out all of the original grots from wave 11 to make sure that you get those free experience tomes. And so you don't end up missing out. And how do you tell which grots those are? Well, you just tap on wave 11 at the top of the screen on the bar that shows your progress through the waves, and that will highlight all of the grots from that wave that are still alive. So then you can selectively pick them off and still hopefully maintain the sort of defensive ring around your characters. So that's that. That's how I think you can actually do quite well in this event, even if if you don't think you're going to be able to clear through everything fast enough to have a chance to start dropping reinforcements on Squig's heads. So now let's get into what I would call the dead ends. And for this we're going on to the Tacticus wiki. Also, just briefly, I have to give credit to Nandy again. That was a screenshot from his YouTube video, which was the only place I could find a good picture of the survival map. So that was a bit annoying, but hey ho, it is what it is, and didn't really need to see much of it anyway as far as what I was talking about. So what are we looking at here? Well, these are the stats for Makatep. And why am I looking at this? Well, I was thinking in that situation I just described with Aleph and Ravas on those hexes blocking off Makatep, when he's standing on that bit of tall grass, he can essentially snipe at the Squigs. And you might think, oh, well, I'll just snipe at the Squigs and eventually take them down from behind my protective wall of grots. But that will be completely ruined by their bounce ability. And I will explain now why that essentially ruins everything. So Makatep, he deals, say you got him to the maximum possible level for this event. Highly recommend you don't do that, because it won't work, but let's just say you did. His damage, at no point will it be enough to overcome the armour of the Squigs. So you'll have to be relying on his 60% pierce ratio. So 60% pierce, you're multiplying the damage of 1,724 by 60%, which comes out to roughly 1,030 damage. Of course, he's dealing 2 hits, so you can double that to 2,060. If you got the extra hits power up on him, the extra ranged hits, that's another 2 hits. So double it again, that's 4,120 damage. If you got the damage power up on him, you can double that again, which will give you 8,240 damage. And then if he's got the high ground bonus against the Squigs, then it's adding another 4,120 damage on top of that. So grand total, 12,360 damage. Not taking variance into account, so that's just the average, and not taking crits into account. But crits won't provide much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. You could just, maybe round it up to an average of 12,500 damage per turn, something like that. I don't know. It's just a ballpark figure. It doesn't matter anyway, because the Squigs have, 600,000 health? So you're going to be needing to hit them 50 times, attack them 50 times with Makatep to get a kill on one of these Squigs. And every time you hit one and don't kill it, it has a 60% chance to bounce 2 hexes. I think it's up to 2 hexes, so up to 2 hexes. So even if you have your defensive wall of grots around you, that Squig will almost certainly, over the course of 50 attacks against it, it is going to bounce towards your characters into the ranks of grots. There is no arguing with that. It is going to happen. And even if the Squig bounces into another Squig, that could then set that Squig off, and then make that Squig bounce into a grot. So, there's no getting around it. I'll leave it at that. There's no getting around it. The grots are going to get bounced into. Now, I'm not sure, because, again, you've got a solid wall of enemies around you in this situation that I'm describing. You've got your wall of grots, and then the Squigs kind of lining up behind them, stamping the ground, not being able to get anywhere, wanting to kill all your stuff and not being able to. The grots will take a lot of damage from the bounces, because grots have no armour and it's physical damage. So there's no getting around the fact that the grots will get worn down and killed. And I'm assuming that if a grot gets killed by being bounced into, the squig will then take the place of that grot. I know that the squigs won't take the place of something if it's unable to be moved, so if the grot is surrounded, that you might be able to say, well, it's not able to be displaced anywhere, so the squig shouldn't take its place, but I have a feeling that if the grot dies in this situation, then the squig will take its place. Even if that isn't the case, still doesn't matter, because you've now got an empty space somewhere in the ranks of grots. And when you're playing the game, when things happen, the order in which things happen is important. And you have all of the enemy characters move first, and then after that occurs is when grots split. So you have no chance of that hole that's been made in the ranks of grots being filled by a grot splitting off from one that is already on the map, because because all of the enemies move first. So the hole's been made, the squig will move into that hole, and then that's the end of that. The squig has now moved up, and it's not going to start moving away from your characters at any point. And inexorably, you're just going to have squigs moving up through the ranks of grots, from bouncing around, from grots being killed, and then the squig running into that place. And because it just takes so many attacks to kill them, unless you have one in infinity chance good RNG where you have no bounces at all over the course of however many shots it takes to kill 12 of these bloody squigs, it ain't gonna happen. You're not gonna survive. Yeah, there's just no hope for you trying this tactic. And another thing I thought of briefly was super kind of trying to super buff up a character and maybe withstand the attacks of the squigs. Now, the squig's damage is some 53,000 damage per hit over 3 hits per attack. So if you get a Diamond 3 Winged Star Tyrant Guard with 2 maxed out legendary defensive items, you can hope to get an armor value of about 40,000-ish. I believe. I do actually have it open in another tab, so I'm just going to look. So scroll down to the stats at Diamond 3. Yeah, 13,000. So you can get it up to 13,000 health at Diamond 3 with the maxed out carapace items. Then if you get the health bonus on the Tyrant Guard, that'll take it up to 39,000 health. And if you get the armor bonus on the Tyrant Guard after that, that'll add 39,000 armor to its base stats to give you a total of 41,000 plus around 600 from the exoskeleton. So say about 42,000 armor. Now the squigs are doing 53,000 damage. And the Tyrant Guard's passive at maximum level, it can reduce damage by 2,000 damage maximum. So that's reducing the squig's damage down to 51,000. And the Tyrant Guard can only block 41,000 damage with its armor. So unless the squigs, again, you have miraculous RNG where they manage to roll the minimum damage on every single hit that they deal, the Tyrant Guard is not going to survive very long against them. And considering the amount of damage it does, which is fairly poor, I suppose if you got the melee hits power up and the hits power up on it, it would do a decent chunk of damage. Even so, you wouldn't have any possibility of getting through all of the squigs with the Tyrant Guard before it gets utterly wiped out by them. And of course, if you're using the Tyrant Guard to tank their attacks, that means you'll have to be using Holland to heal the Tyrant Guard, and Holland is, I'm just going to say it, he's pretty shit. His heal is so terrible. Even at maximum level, I think it only does around 4,000 heal per turn, something like that, which is pretty awful. There's no way you're going to keep the Tyrant Guard alive with that. And of course, again, there's the simple matter of the fact that when you attack with the Tyrant Guard, the squig is probably going to bounce. So even if you've managed to engineer a situation where squigs can only get to the Tyrant Guard, the squigs will bounce, they'll get next to one of your other characters and start killing them. And pretty soon your Tyrant Guard is going to be left without any help. Holland's going to die, and you're just going to be up a certain creek without a paddle. And that will be the end of that. Now, the final thing that you might be considering doing is flooding the map with summons. Oh boy, this isn't going to work at all. How are you going to do this? Well, the only feasible way of doing it is with Aleph Null's Scarabs. Aleph Null, the Scarabs, good luck getting them to the final wave with 3 swarms still able to replicate, because you've got a Snotflogger coming out at some point who does a lot of hits. Obviously you want the Scarabs to come out early to have enough time to fill up the map. But you've got Snotflogger who does enough hits to kill a Scarab Swarm in one go, in one attack. You've got Boss Golgorts who does enough hits in melee to kill them in one attack. You've got Grot Tanks which deal blast damage, which allow them to kill the swarms in one attack. You've got Orc Boys who throw bombs which can kill the swarms in one attack. I think you're starting to get the idea, hopefully, that Scarab Swarms are not going to be able to survive long enough in this event. But let's say by some miracle you manage to get the Scarab Swarms to endure to the point where they've got the entire map covered, and squigs start to spawn in, and they're stuck in the 4 corners of the map. So the squigs can deal 3 hits, and you've got 4 of them in the corners of the map. So they're dealing 12 hits per turn. So you need the Scarab Swarms to be able to replenish 12 hits worth of damage per turn. Now, you might think, well, that's impossible, because you can only have 2 Scarab Swarms that are able to replicate at one time. Not true. You can use Aunchi's active on a Scarab Swarm, and that will replenish its ability to replicate itself. So you can actually have 3 swarms running around the battlefield at the same time, able to replenish, which would give you essentially 15 hits worth of Scarabs replenished every single turn. So you might think, okay, so that's 15 hits worth of damage being replenished, and the squigs can only deal 12. So they're kind of being held indefinitely in the corners of the map. Well, you'd be wrong, because if a hole is opened up next to a spawn point, jeez, okay, just making sure I'm still recording that. Sorry, I have a habit of closing my eyes when I'm speaking because it helps me to gather my train of thoughts better, but then I don't notice when the screen turns off. Sorry. So, when a hole opens up next to a spawn point, anything that is waiting inside the spawn point will immediately move into that hole. So the moment the squig kills a Scarab Swarm adjacent to it, which it will eventually, then another squig will come out of the spawn point immediately and into the hole that's been made. So now you've got 15 hits being dealt by the enemy per turn, which is equaling the amount that your Scarab Swarms can replenish. Of course, you also have the factor of whenever the squigs get hit by the Scarab Swarms, they might bounce and deal even more damage to Scarab Swarms. So again, this strategy is a non-starter completely. Anything to do with any other spawns, no other spawns are able to clog the map as well as Aleph Null's Scarabs can. And if they can't do the job, then nothing else can either. So again, complete non-starter. Don't even think of trying it. And I think hopefully this video has been useful, because there are a lot of blind alleys that if you don't think about it enough, you could try and go down and just waste tokens. So my advice again, as I said at the start, just follow Nandy's recommendations for characters. They're perfectly fine recommendations. Maybe use my idea at the end of cheesing points by attacking a unit that can be healed, i.e. the enemy Golgorts. But aside from that, enjoy the event, try and get the extra codices from the 11th wave if you can, but don't think that your clever little schemes will be able to get you anywhere this time, because I imagine they won't, unless there's something that I've missed out, which is entirely possible, and I'd be interested to hear about any potential strategies that you might have thought about, but I just don't think that there's any way around this one. I don't think it's going to be possible to win, which is a shame, but it is what it is, so just try and do the best you can with the situation, and I'll leave it at that.